Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good evening. My name is Jim Thornton. I think you all know me. This is an event that it's quite an experiment, really. I've never had an event quite like it. Although we've had quite a lot of conservative political garden parties for the Conservative Party in this garden. We've never had an event quite like this, Mark, have we? But you also know that I've been a failed politician for some time. I've stood many times for election. I always take the precaution of never standing for a winnable seat, so there's no danger of getting in, and I've never got anywhere near being elected. But I have now given that up. And this is the day, this is the event when I actually come out. And I'm not really a Conservative. I am a Conservative. I'm going to carry on voting Conservative, and I'm going to campaign. And I was campaigning this very morning for Mark Spencer here in the middle in the check shirt to be the next Conservative MP for Sherwood, the constituency in which you're standing. So I am a Conservative, but I'm actually a Libertarian. And a lot of you who kindly come to this party have written to me and said, "What is a Libertarian? What's all this about? What are Libertarians?" Well, we're sort of half Conservatives and we're half Liberals. We're not socialists in any sense, but the Conservative Party believes in small government. It likes low taxes. It likes to leave people alone most of the time. But every now and again, when it comes to things like social policy and the way we behave sexually and the way whether people are allowed to smoke a little bit of cannabis in the privacy of their own home, the Conservative Party goes all over the place and starts saying, no, you've got to, that's not allowed, we must lock you up in prison for doing such a terrible thing. And liberals see, or leftists, socialists, are rather more liberal on that sort of social policy side of things, but unfortunately we can't possibly vote for them because they want the government to tax us to the hilt, or tax us at all, and try and make things better. Now the Libertarians are on the small government side, so we're Conservative there, but we're on the socially liberal side, and therefore I guess to some extent with the left like that. And there's never been a Libertarian Party. There isn't a Libertarian Party in this country at the moment, but there is a Libertarian Alliance. There are people that are keeping these sorts of ideas alive. When I talk to people, I know lots and lots of people actually do agree with these sorts of policies. And probably the one man who has done more to keep these libertarian ideas alive over the last 4 or 5 years, I've really been hearing about Sean Gabb for about 4 or 5 years. I don't know, but is our speaker today. Now, many of you will have heard him, and many of you will have seen him on the television. He's on the radio and he's on the television almost every day. But you don't see him very much because he's never allowed on till after midnight. So if you're like me, early to bed, you won't see Sean. It's very, very difficult, Richard. I had that problem last time. You have to squat.
We've all been fine.
So can I welcome our speaker, Sean Gabb. He's the director of the Libertarian Alliance. He's going to speak to us for 10 minutes, and then we'll have a few questions, and then we'll go and eat. Sean Gabb.
Okay, well, I'd like to begin by thanking Jim and Sue for having me up here, and I'd like to thank you all for coming out to listen to me, and I hope to listen to each other. So I'm going to speak for 10 minutes, and some of you may be asking, what is a libertarian? And you can express that in 3 clauses. A libertarian is somebody who wants to be left alone. A libertarian is somebody who wants to leave other people alone. And a libertarian is somebody who wants other people to be left alone. Now that's a very simplistic way of putting it, but I think that pretty well sums it up. And Jim has had the kindness to come out as a libertarian, and so I suppose I should make a confession of my own. When it comes to conservatism, I am that way inclined myself. So, why should Conservatives pay any attention to a rather exotic ideology like libertarianism. And the short answer is that if you are Conservatives, you are, or you should be, committed to preserving the English way. And what is the English way about? Well, the English way is about freedom of thought and conscience, freedom of religion, freedom of speech and publication, freedom of association and freedom of enterprise. When it comes to the criminal law, it's about things like habeas corpus, that you cannot be detained unreasonably without charge. When it comes to a charge, that you go into court and you face a jury. And during the trial, you have the benefit of the doubt. You are innocent until proven guilty. And the state in criminal proceedings is at a systematic procedural disadvantage. Now, that is the tradition of this country. We are about freedom, and we're also about living a limited, but by historical standards, a most astonishing welcome to those people who want to share our ways. Now, we have created for ourselves in these islands a very nice civilization over the past few hundred years. And our civilization has been the envy of the world, and much more important than the envy of the world, we have been an inspiration to the world. Our ways that we have developed in these islands have become the basis of many countries which are larger and more populous and more wealthy than our own. And so we are free and we are successful. And so for that reason, I would say that Conservatives should have a natural interest in libertarianism. Because what we are trying to preserve is the raw material from which philosophers have distilled the ideologies of classical liberalism and libertarianism. You do not need to believe every jot and tittle of the libertarian ideology that we are broadcasting daily from our website. But if you are the kind of person who shrugs and says, it's none of our business, mind your own business, he does with his business, then in a vague degree, you are a libertarian. Of course, I say that we live in a free and successful country, but sadly, in recent decades, it has become less free. And at first, when the last Conservative government, sad to say, when the last Conservative government began to take little nibbles at things like the right to silence, the right to peremptory challenge of jurors, pre-publication censorship of videos and so on, many people just said, well, what's the fuss? What's the fuss? When I said, we're moving towards a police state, this is the slippery slope, they would laugh at me. And I would often find that when I came to gatherings like this, that there was a credibility gap. Well, we're now 11 years into the most ghastly Labour government that we've ever had. There is something about this Labour government which is utterly exceptional. If I'd been around at the time, I would have been against Clement Attlee, the beastly socialist. I'd have been against Harold Wilson. My grandmother, God rest her soul, she used to shake her fist at the television set when the man came on. And I couldn't understand the visceral hatred he had for Harold Wilson and all things Labour. I despised and pitied and sometimes felt sorry for James Callaghan. But say what you like about past Labour governments, they were run by normal people. They were wrong, but there was nothing odd about them. When you look at the people we've had in charge of us for the past 11 years, you have to say, these people are not normal. You look at them, you listen to them, and you look at the things that they're doing. And what can you say about them? They're gross. Now, I won't go on about the 42-day limit on detention because that's all been done to death in the media, and I'm glad to say that David Davis will give it another good airing in the by-election, which I think is on the 10th of July. But what I'll say is that from my own point of view, for many years I was not just semi-detached from the Conservative Party, but in a state of extreme loathing of the Conservative Party, because your leaders have sat out most of the last 11 years not putting up a credible opposition to this awful Labour government. And for many years I did hope and pray that the UK Independence Party would push you lot out of the way, and then we could have a good pro-British party which would get us out of the European Union and give us back some of our stolen freedoms. But that hasn't happened, has it? And we're now coasting down towards a general election in which the choice for me and for you is, which do you want to be Prime Minister, Gordon Brown or David Cameron? And I'll tell you now, under ideal circumstances, I'd say neither, thank you very much. But we're not under ideal circumstances. It's a question of getting in a semi-conservative government which will have many good people in it and will have a lot of support from good people, but which will, let's be honest, disappoint us, and more of the same. And I suppose all I can say is that my wanderings away from the Conservative Party are coming to an end. I'll probably vote Conservative next time. In 5 years' time I'll be rather ashamed of it, I don't doubt. But a Conservative government led by David Cameron cannot possibly be worse than what we have at the moment. And the thought of another 5 or 10 years of these people will make me want to emigrate to New Zealand. And I wouldn't want to do that because I'd miss the weather. So thank you very much for having listened to me. I believe there'll be questions or other comments. I'll be very happy to listen to those. But thank you very much.
With Sean. I'm sure you will. You will take questions, Sean, won't you?
I'll take questions.
I better warn you that the audiences are probably only about a quarter Conservative. The activists, they may very well be Conservatives, the rest of them, but I guess only about a quarter. Mark Spencer is going to be the next Member of Parliament for Sherwood, where you're standing now. Mark.
Thank you, Jim. I understand the principle. I understand liberalism, but it's a dream to me. It's not real and it's not practical. I'll give you 3 examples which I'd like you to comment on. Should I be free to publish paedophilia? Should I be free to smoke in a confined room and make those people around me ill? And should I be free to incite racism?
Okay, let's take those 3 questions, and then I'll say them in general. The first is, should you be free to publish paedophilia? If you want to publish text and line drawings, it may be distasteful, but the answer is yes. If you want to publish photographs or videos of underage children, the answer is no, because underage children are not competent to make those decisions. Should you be free to smoke in a confined place? Yes, if the owner of the property allows you to. And the third one is, should you be free to incite racial hatred? Should you be free to turn up outside a synagogue or a mosque and shout insults? No. But should you be free to say anything you like about these matters? The answer is yes, of course. Just as you could before 1968. Now, on the question of the dream, in this country, libertarianism is not some wild-eyed dream. It's a return to the past. Until 1914, you could wander around in this country and you hardly ever saw the state, unless you went to a post office or if you saw a policeman in the street. You could go into a gun shop, buy a gun, take it home and use it to defend yourself. You could go into a pharmacist and buy any number of rather strange substances which you could take home, no questions asked, and consume by yourself. You could live free. You could bring your children up in the way you wanted. You could live your life in the way you wanted, and the taxes were very low. And so I'm not looking forward to some wild-eyed science fiction future, though I am. but I'm also looking back to a time when this was a genuinely free country. And Eurosceptics are always saying, I want my country back. Well, I want my country back in the sense that I want laws to be made in Westminster, not in Brussels. But I also want my country back in the sense that I want control back over my life so that I can bring up my daughter in the way that I think appropriate.
Can I just have 10 seconds, Jim?
You can.
Just to say, so what we're saying is, really, it's not a question of whether we're free or not free, it's a question of where we draw the line. So the difference between the two of us, I suppose, is the debate over where we draw the actual line in the sand, which is where the argument for me becomes tenuous, really, over the whole thing.
Yes, between us it's a question of where you draw the line. Between me and the average Labour politician, we're standing on different pieces of territory. But I rather hope that over the course of the next few years you will feel yourself dragged much more in my direction.
I'm sure that's true. It's way. Rick, actually,
Sorry,
you had your hand up first.
Sorry. I mean, I'm probably as close as you're going to get to sort of a plant here, because I know Sean from, we've never met before, but we've known each other through the internet for a long time. So. I think one of the things that, I mean, I think one of the things that perhaps Sean, he hasn't mentioned actually today, and we've had a lot of debates about this, is the one thing that people are forgetting about this is it's not just about personal freedom. It's also about personal responsibility.
Yes.
It's about people taking responsibility for their own lives. And I think that's the message that often gets lost, which is that it's not a case of we just want to be able to do what we want to do. It's we want to take responsibility for our own lives, and if something happens, we are responsible. We hold our hand up and said it was our fault.
People are allowed to fail. That's
Exactly.
true.
Rather than this continual, the socialist way, which is basically, and the way that's become in this country, which is that basically government will take responsibility for you. And that's what's wrong in the country today.
Adam.
Does it go, can I ask, libertarianism goes beyond that, because I wanted to ask where you stand in terms of social conscience. And this thing about rights and responsibilities is a debate we have often in the NHS. And does it go beyond personal responsibility in terms of what you should be contributing? Because there are always going to be the less privileged within our communities. And whose responsibility is it to look after them? Part of the social argument is that government has got bigger and bigger and bigger, deciding it was their role to look after those on the government's terms. So where do you stand on that?
Okay, going back to Trick's point, libertarianism is as much about responsibility as about freedom. And I'm really sick of seeing sort of pond life criminals coming on the television and saying it was my circumstance that made me do this. No, it was your choice to do these evil things, and you must take the consequences. Now, when it comes to looking after those people who are less able or less fortunate than ourselves, of course, again, that is a matter of personal responsibility. We do have an obligation to help those people who cannot help themselves. At the moment, because we live in the kind of state that we do, I don't see any short-term alternative to letting the government dip into our pocket and take money for the old, the poor, the sick, and generally those who have been left behind. But in a free society, there'll be far fewer people left behind, and there'll be far more spontaneous charity from individuals and groups of people, which will make state action unnecessary. And let's face it, how much do we spend on social welfare in this country, including the NHS? An enormous amount of money. And has it made us healthier? Has it made us happier? Has it narrowed inequalities? No, it hasn't. State action doesn't work. But at the moment, there's not much alternative to it in the short term.
Can I have one? I'm an obstetrician, and I have an academic clinic, and the drug-addicted mothers of Nottingham are seen. They're actually looked after by other people, but I can oversee the whole thing. They come to my antenatal clinic, and they are in a terrible, terrible state. And my colleagues all think I'm barking when I say that they would be much, much better if we just legalised, and I don't mean legalising cannabis, I mean legalising heroin, cocaine, the lot. For adult people who want to take in the privacy of their own home, I think if we legalise all of them, including the hard drugs, as long as they weren't drinking cocaining and driving, or whatever it was at the same time, it seems to me that that would actually reduce harm. Now, what do you say to some of my colleagues are here? They think bonkers when I say that, and I'm howled down as a politician when I say that. Never going to get elected.
There is no doubt that if you consume large numbers of recreational drugs, it will mess your life up. But the big question is, we've had 80 years of a war on drugs, and it's been a total failure. The number of people dependent on these substances has gone up and up and up and up. And it doesn't matter what laws you make, it doesn't matter what powers you give the police. There is nothing you can do to keep the addict away from the dealer. And so the only humane thing that we can do is to legalise the lot. It wouldn't do any more harm than the present state of illegality, and it would be a step towards responsibility. At the moment, drug addicts, they can say, oh, the dealers messed me up. Well, no, again, when you take too much heroin or when you smoke crack cocaine, you are messing yourself up. And that's the message that people need to understand.
Would you have drugs sold through the, like a legal system, like government controlling monopolies or something like that?
You know the answer to that, don't you?
No, I wouldn't regard that as an idea. But the point is, what you're asking is not should we legalise drugs, but how would we do it? The question is, should we legalise them? Yes, I would say yes. But how we should do it, that depends on circumstances. It may be that the first step towards legalisation would be to restore the power that doctors had before, I think, 1968, where you could go to your general practitioner and say, I'm a heroin addict, will you prescribe for me? You may be able to get these things for a doctor on prescription. You may be able to go to a pharmacist and buy reasonable amounts. There may be a state monopoly. I don't know, but you see, anything would be better than the present state of affairs, where it's all theoretically illegal, all practically available, and is destroying lives up and down the country.
Hamish, you want to come in?
Yeah. How has it gone this way? Because I can see, I can very easily see the government's incentive to say increase taxation and spending, but say detention without trial or arresting people for carrying copies of The Independent in the wrong part of London. I don't quite see their incentive for behaving that way and why they think it gives them an electoral advantage or an advantage in government.
Well, a number of reasons. The first is, I don't believe that politicians, for the most part, understand what ordinary people want. They follow the opinion polls as obsessively as a hardcore gambling addict reads the Racing Post. But I don't think the opinion polls give a full picture of what people want. The second point, the motivation for doing this. A good friend of mine has always told me that what the politicians want is a quick, cheap fix. They're technocrats, and if violating due process gets primed down, they think they should do it. My own view is that these are bad people.
I'm with you there.
They want a police state, and you look behind the soft, caring voices of these people, and what you see is a naked lust for power. And I could go on about this. I wrote a book about it last year, all about the Marxist takeover of England. I have copies back there. But it is significant to look at Labour ministers and Labour members of Parliament and to see how many of these were wearing donkey jackets 30 years ago and selling copies of Social Worker outside underground stations, or were members of Marxist organisations. Now, it's rather cruel to say it, but I do believe that once a Marxist, always a Marxist. It ruins, it rots your mind. You can shave off the beard, you can put the donkey jacket away, you can put on an Armani suit and have the nice pilot hats, but it's still rotting away inside your mind. And these people run the country, and it's not surprising the country's in a mess.
Rick, you had...
Sorry, I was just going to say, the other thing actually that ties in with this from my mind is I'll never do it, but I always wanted to write a book which is called What We've Lost. Because one of the problems in Britain today is that, Sean's saying about the way things used to be, 95% of people in Britain don't know how it used to be. And so they've grown up in a situation where they think that what we have now is the way it has always been, and that the government has always had these powers, and that it can never be any different. And so one of the things part of the thing that, say, the Libertarians need to do, or the Conservatives, they need to educate people about how things can be and how they used to be, and all the things that we've lost. The rights and powers that disappear.
80 years of the boot stamping on the face.
Yeah,
of
exactly.
Like it.
Yeah.
Sudesh. My Sudesh stood for the Conservatives in Nottingham South last time. And fought an excellent fight.
I just want to bring the subject back to the original question, and it's a twofold question I have for you. Talk a lot about freedom, and when the original questioner asked the question about freedom, an observation for me was that you immediately put boxes around it. So, yes, freedom, but provided it's done this way and not that way. So the first question that...
Point. If you listen to the very principles...
Can I just finish my...
You're trying to...
I think, Richard, I'm going to hold you. I will bring you in.
So the first question that goes to my mind is, maybe we need to think about the definition of freedom. What do we mean by freedom? Because it's a very old subject, isn't it? So I'd be interested to get your thoughts on, if you can, define what freedom looks like. And the second question is, we've talked a lot about how it used to be. As a kid, when I grew up, I remember it was all about discipline. It was about these boundaries. It was about, this is the way society expects me and others to behave. Whereas today, my interpretation is very much about, I can do whatever I want to do, and no one can do anything about it. So I'll be interested in, again, your thoughts about the contradiction in terms of, we say freedom, I guess the youth of today appear to have more freedom than the youth ever did. Certainly when I was a kid, I had to behave in a certain way, and those boundaries were put there by my parents, primarily. So I just want to get your thoughts on those two issues.
You next, Richard. Hold on.
I'll give a quick answer to that, because it's a big question, and I'll probably give an unsatisfactory answer. But, okay, I'm a father, and I do hope that I shall place boundaries. And it's the duty of a parent to place boundaries for children. And in a free society, it doesn't mean that it's a total free-for-all. In a free society, there are social regulations of certain things. You shouldn't spit in the street. If you do that, people will come up to you and say, "You filthy beast, stop doing that." And there are many other things that you shouldn't do in public. And a free society is one in which people can express their preferences in this way. Young people are freer today than they've ever been. Well, in a sense, yes, they are, and to some extent I welcome that. But one of the reasons why so many young people, I think, are hanging around shopping centres, getting bombed out of their minds on cheap drink and various kinds of illegal substance, is because they know that something has gone badly wrong. This is a symptom of a kind of political sickness that we're all suffering. You know, as I said, in a free country, people do tend to be polite to each other. They do tend to behave well in public. And there's this invisible web of restraints that stop you from doing stupid and unsocial things. What we have now is a police state in which all of these voluntary social webs have been torn apart. And nowadays, it's a question between a free-for-all in which you can do anything you like, as long as the surveillance cameras are not pointing in your direction. And that's surely not what we want. It's not a satisfactory answer, but you can appreciate it's a big question. But
I promised all these good people when they came to my garden party that I'd give them only half an hour of medicine. So I'm going to begin to cut this short. Richard, Martin and Peter, I wanted to ask questions. I'm going to take a question one after the other, and then I'm going to give you the last
word. Just an observation. It was just so,
observations will do.
Yeah, it was just to say, the two gentlemen behind me said, you know, you're trying to box in freedom. If you apply the principles, he hasn't. He said, if free to do what you want, free to let other people do what they want, and free to follow the first point.
To make sure that other people...
Yeah. And if you apply those principles so that if I say, oh, I want to punch you in the face, but that's denying your freedom, it's a very simple philosophical concept. It's not about boxing it in, it's just saying, you've got rights, I've got rights, that means we have to live together, so we have to find some space to do it in. It's not a matter of boxing it in. The final observation, you think of the politicians on the Labour side, you said they're evil people. Let's park that. I think they know best, and that's the difference.
Yeah.
They think they know better than we do. That's why we went to referendums.
Martin here has been campaigning very successfully against the wind farm up at Billsthorpe.
Mike, you'll get it right.
Oh, I'm Mike!
But no, I mean,
Anyway.
the point about freedom is that it doesn't. True freedom, it doesn't mean to say you have to do what you are free to do, and it cannot operate within a social, moral, and ethical vacuum. And the simplest sort of standard is that to do unto others that which you would wish to be done unto yourself. And unfortunately, within our modern education system, we've removed that ethical and moral teaching in order to somehow sublimate the state to that very that authority. And it seems to me that the whole purpose of freedom brings with it huge responsibility, which was mentioned earlier. And the truly free state is actually a very responsible state, but it has to have very strong moral and ethical grounding in order to succeed. And that because of the way society has gone over the last 10, 20, 30 years, that structure has been eroded enormously, and therefore there is no longer, the guidelines have gone. I mean, the breakdown of family life, so that the old disciplines, which were actually taught the boundaries, have disappeared.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to see how you can bring that back, because I mean, we don't live in the family unit like we used to. Our parents are hundreds of miles away, our grandparents are even further away. All of those things that we used to take for granted, and which within Europe still exist.
I'm going to ask Peter Little just a story.
Some of the points that I'd like to make have been very well made by the gentleman in the middle and the gentleman on my left, but I think that as we have a societal framework in which there has got to be a measure not just of freedom, but also protection, and also some measure of discipline. And my personal feeling is, while I'm identified with all the things of which you've spoken, answering them in practical terms, in the framework of living in which, whether we live in the town, the village or the country, is not as easy as it may appear as you address us.
Okay, that's the last question. The practical politics.
Okay. Many people seem to think at the back of their minds that freedom is the right to dye your hair green. Freedom is the right to put rings through your face and through other parts of your anatomy. Freedom is the right to do shocking and outrageous things. Well, freedom is that, but from our point of view, freedom is the right to be able to shut your front door on the world and know that you are in your own world. It's the right to bring your children up in the morals of your choice. It is the right to know that you are in control of your life. You may not want to do anything particularly outrageous in your life, but we do live in a state in which the government can and might well stop you from doing things which a few years ago were regarded as unquestionably normal and decent. And so I would suggest that, you know, even if you live lives that are utterly blameless, and even if the television cameras were put into your house and most people didn't want to watch it because it was so boring, you should have a strong interest in freedom, because freedom is your right to be normal. I think that's a good point of view.
That's the point at which to end. Thank you. Thank you, Sean, very much. I wanted to administer a good dose of libertarian common sense to this lot, and you've done exactly what I intended. You've done it in less than half an hour, which is marvellous. I promised you that you'd only have a good hefty dose, and then it would finish. So now you may go and eat. Sue has cooked you a lovely tea, and it's the normal format for those who've been here before. work your way around the terrace, go in the way you came out, be careful of the slippery floor, and turn right, and you'll work your way around the table. And I'd like you to come out again, but if you're weak and wimpish, you may sit on the terrace.